This meeting is being recorded.
Bingo. Hey, it's 8 o'clock. It is Tuesday, the third Tuesday of the month. It's February 18th. This is DMR Tech Net TV. We do this once a month, and we try and demystify and explain and have interesting guests talking about digital mobile radio or some aspects of it. I'm Dana, KC0MYP, along with my co-assistants. We've got Stan, WB8QJZ, Rick, 88KN. We've also got, where is he? Steve, KC8WXM, and Tom, N8TJ. That's all I recognize. So we're missing Brad, but hopefully he'll join us shortly. Anyway, tonight we have our special guest. We have Al from Hackaday, who was on our DMR TechNet last night. Real quick, Al's going to talk about how we can all write for Hackaday, get our articles published, and make lots of money and retire rich. I believe that's what he told me earlier. But here's what it says on his Hackaday article. Al was in love with computers and ham radio before the Altair 8800 arrived. In the intervening years, he designed hardware and software systems ranging from tiny embedded sensors to mainframe build systems. He's been an editor or columnist for several magazines, including Dr. Dobbs Journal, and has written numerous books on hardware and software topics. He has a strong passion for digital design, including implementing CPUs on FPGAs. I'm sure he's going to tell us about that tonight. I read what it was earlier, but I forget what it was. When he isn't soldering or programming, you might find Al at a local high school teaching kids about engineering or riding his Can-Am Spider in the sweltering summer heat. That's what happens when you're in Houston.
True.
Anyway, good evening. Hi, Al, WD5GNR. Welcome back to the DMR TechNet, but tonight it's DMR TechNet TV on Zoom. And how this works is we'll give the platform over to you to let you talk as long as you want about Hackaday or any other subject you want. And then when you're done, we'll open it up to questions. We'll start with the DMR TechNet team and then take everyone else. And with that, welcome, Al, WD5GNR. Tell us about Hackaday.
Thanks, Dana. Well, appreciate you having me on. Yeah, well, what I'll do, if you don't mind, I think you adequately introduced me, so I think anything I say at this point about that's not going to be helpful. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen real quick, and I'll just show you just a couple of charts that I think will kind of shed some light on things. Let's see. There you go. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
You'll notice the rich is struck out and the famous has a sort of in it. So
good sense of humor.
Yeah, so, Hackaday, I'm assuming everybody has peeked at the Hackaday website from time to time. It's a fairly big website. We're actually, believe it or not, owned indirectly by Siemens, the big German company. That's not how they started, though. It's been acquired several times by several different people. But we really feature three main types of stories. It's one of those things, if you're just reading, you don't always pick up on this, right? But we really have three things. We're kind of a reader's digest for what we think of as the hacker community, and hams are part of that larger community. So we have some hams. We have some people who are, I made an LED that blinks. I made a robot. I fly drones. I 3D print, all those kind of communities. And so we do a lot of things where we say, oh, look, Dana built a recording studio in his house. And the reason that's interesting is some interesting reason, right? But we also do original articles. That's what I really like to do. But of course, we have to have a lot of the others too. And we also do news. So sometimes it's space news, or sometimes it's electronics or physics, or, you just never know. It's just got to be something that would be interesting to our readership, which is you. So as you mentioned, I've written for a ton of magazines. I don't have my ham radio credits on here, but I've been in QST, QEX, 73. Interesting, Wayne Green forgot to pay me for the article in 73, and I had to kind of badger him for that. But if you remember Wayne Green. So, but I did write for 73. I've written for Nuts and Volts and things like that. So it turns out I had been featured myself in Hackaday a couple of times. And, when that happens, when you have a project that Hackaday picks up, you go look and see what people are saying about it, right? And it just happened one of those times they had a post saying, hey, we're looking for new writers. And that was about the time Dr. Dobbs was shutting down. And so, as they say, the rest is history. Now, here's the part that's disappointing. Do we take guest authors? And the answer is generally no. But remember what I said about that first part. If you look, 90% of our articles are, oh, look, this guy built a CW transmitter and it's unique for this reason. So what that means is if you've done something, how do you get us to notice it, right? That's really the thing. And then we will write that up, and that's where you get the Hackaday effect, as we say, which will shut down your personal web server if you're not hosted somewhere robust. The trick is you need to have something that's up there. It's got to be something, obviously, that's interesting to us, somewhat unique or novel, or, it doesn't have to necessarily be rocket science. We have readers of all various levels, right? So, excuse me. So, I mean, maybe it's old hat to you that you did an Arduino to run your rotator or something, but somebody's going to find that interesting. So if it's written up nicely and in a way that we can make something out of it, we probably will. Like I said, we publish a boatload of stuff every month. So, usually about 10 things a day. So that's 300 things a month. It's hard to find 300 things a month to talk about. So we're always looking for something. Again, we want to see something that's kind of cool or clever or original. It's well described. It's reproducible. A lot of times we'll see something and somebody says, "Oh, look, I made this," and you go, "Well, that's fine. How did you make it?" "I don't know." What did you? It's cool. Yes, we get it, but something without pictures is always a hard sell because we have to have a picture somewhere, right? So if we've got to go make up a picture of something or find something, it's not great. We will take pictures out of video. So if you got a video, you've got your pictures, and we'll figure that out. So, I don't want to belabor this, but those are the kind of things, if you've got projects that fit that, then the question is where do you put it, right? And one of the things that we do offer is Hackaday I, which is a place that you can put your things in, and it's kind of got I don't know, it's a weird format, but you can say, here's my project, here's a bunch of pictures, here's the bill of materials, and all that's free, right? That's just a community service thing. It's a community of people will like your, it's kind of a social media thing. They'll like your projects and all. But if you have no place else to put it on Hackaday I. Now, that doesn't mean we only take things off of Hackaday I. So if you're familiar with something like Instructables, or if you're on YouTube, or you have your own blog, it doesn't really matter. And then I'll tell you later how to maybe get our attention for that. We do talk about a lot of different things. The different authors have different preferences. Quite a few people up here are hams or have been hams. Obviously I'm WD5GNR. Elliot, our editor, he used to be a ham. I think he let it lapse because he lives in Germany and didn't want to come back to renew his license. I'm not sure or doesn't have a permanent address or some story. Dan Maloney had the series for a while, the $50 ham, trying to entice people to get their ham license. So he's also a ham. Jenny List is a ham over in the UK. So we've got a bunch of authors. We write about a lot of topics. We probably tend to write about things we like. So like I rarely write about gaming, for example, but Tom is a big gamer. And so he, because I don't know anything about it. You could send me anything about gaming and is it novel? I don't know. I really don't know. We don't like commercialism. We don't like fuzzy pictures. We don't like no details. And obviously anything that's in bad taste, we don't like that. I really can't emphasize enough that we really see a range of projects where some things are really simple, but they're presented in such a way that people can benefit from them. And then sometimes we see things where it's like, oh, I made a scanning electron microscope. Okay, realistically, none of us are going to do that, but it's still pretty interesting to see how you did that. So, there's a wide range of, I did amazing things, or I did something that's very accessible to a student or a new person. So I want to do one more, and then I'm going to get off the stage here. And if we have time or interest, we'll come back to some of this. But we have a tip line, and that's a very easy way to put things up and say, hey, look, I did this, and it doesn't have to be your stuff. People tip us all the time about, oh, I saw this video. I think it'd be really interesting. We get a lot like that too. But obviously, you got to be pretty invested to do that. But if it's your stuff, that's even better, right? You're going to say, hey, I did this. Here's where it's posted. Here's why it's interesting. But you know what? You can also hit us up individually. So if you look back on that one chart, if you've got something that's, 3D printing related, maybe drop a note to the guy that does 3D printing. You certainly know how to get in touch with me. And so things that I'm interested in, ham radio, FPGAs, things like that, that's certainly something you could keep in mind as well. So again, if you don't have any place to host it on Hackaday I. That's not a requirement, but we do pick up a lot of stuff from there, and it's a free service where you can do that. So I'm going to stop sharing at that point, but that's the gist of it. Is if you want to be on Hackaday, write it up nicely, get some good pictures, make it interesting, and let us know about it. That's really the big thing, because we'll work with almost anything that's within reason if you'll just let us know about it.
Interesting. That sounds pretty cool. As we were talking earlier about the M1KE, that might be something to talk about. I find it amazing. It says on your biography, you've written almost 4,000 articles.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Wow. And then,
believe it or not, there is a old Hackaday author named Brian Benchoff who's not with us anymore. I'm still about 1,000 behind him. So
you just got to learn to love to write. We were talking.
Something.
Yeah, we were talking on the DMR Tech Net team about how QSP magazine for the ARRL has hardly any DMR articles in it. So I wrote to the editor. She says, "No problem, you can write for us." But that was like 2.5 years ago. We've not done anything since.
Yeah.
So who knows? You talked about projects, and Rick 88K. And by the way, you guys can unmute yourself. Rick is working on projects with Pi-Star as well as Arduino boards and robotics. And is that something that Hackaday covers?
Absolutely. I think there's always a balance. If you get too far in the weeds on some particular thing, it may not be general interest enough. So, if you said, "Oh, I modified Pi-Star to have this very obscure feature or something," you'd have to fight to figure out a way to make that generally interesting, right? But if you said, "I designed a PC board to be a new hat for a Raspberry Pi or for a different, Orange Pi or something, and the reason I did that was because I need a radio hooked up so I can do Pi-Star on it," that would get picked up very quickly and very little doubt about it. Same thing with robotics, right? I think if you had some well-defined story. And, again, I can't emphasize enough the value of story there, right? So like if you say, "I went to the high school and I did robotics with the robot team and we got a box and we opened it up and we followed the instructions," that's probably not going to get picked up. But you could make it into something that got picked up, right? So what did you learn from that? What did the kids learn from that? If there was some overriding theme that said, we opened the box up, we found out these parts didn't go well together, so what did we do about it, right? There's usually some way that you can take something. My wife marvels at that we'll be watching TV and I'll go, "Oh, that's a Hackaday article. We could get something out of that," and it'll be the history of some obscure thing. What was the one I did the other day? Oh, the way they broke into the Antwerp diamond vault to steal all the diamonds back in 2003 or something. There was all this technological stuff they did to defeat the alarms, and so that'll be an article one day. It may not be today. So there's always some way to spin this stuff. You just got to look at it, and you have to look at it from somebody else's point of view, right? If you were reading Hackaday and you saw that, would you go, "So what?" Or would you go, "Oh, that's interesting," and that's what you want, is something that people are going to find interesting.
Oh, that is cool. You were also talking Instructables. That's for 3D printing, and I've got a 3D printer, and I saw you've written some articles on it. But let me see if I have. There it is. One thing I did with my 3D printer, you can see them with my Anytone radios. Colored, they're black knobs. I got colored knobs. I found them on Instructables or one of the 3D printing sites. Come to find out. Yeah, and come to find out, some of those aren't that good. It took me a couple times to get them to print or find a different one. And I went to my local high school, the tall one. They made those, and he goes, "Yeah, I reinforced it," because he knows what he's doing when he designs them. And yeah, that I don't have a problem. The other ones, they get a little loose over time, but yeah, pretty cool on that one. Normally we go with the first question. It's over to our good friend Tom, who's the co-founder of the DMR Tech Net. Tom, we were talking QST magazine, some interesting stuff in there, and they always have cool projects other than things about DMR. Tom, unmute yourself and tell us your comments or questions for Al tonight.
Well, I just had some brief time. Hi, everybody. I got a brief minute to look through the Hackaday stuff. And the word I just heard Al say, the Reader's Digest. And when I was a kid, I used to like Reader's Digest. I remember it vividly because my mom didn't like it. She wanted me to read a full book. The Reader's Digest was always the abbreviation, but it was enjoyable as ever because it had such a broad, you could find something in there that was interesting. Is that a good way to look at the Hackaday thought process as far as what might be submitted? I'm accused all the time of doing so many different things, and I really do. If that's one thing that's a problem for me, it's time management for all the different things I just like doing. So Reader's Digest runs around in my mind all the time. Does it have to be tech-based, Al, or is it can be anything? Can it relate it to motorcycles or technology on motorcycles or ham radio on motorcycles or exploration on motorcycles, stuff like that too?
Again, I think a lot of it depends on how you spin it, right? So, I have a Can-Am Spider, as you know, or as you may have heard. So if I just said, here's my Can-Am Spider, it's got 3 wheels, it's really cool, that's not going to run, right? We're not that site. There's sites like that. We're just not that site. But if I had something about, the front keeps popping open, so I went and figured out how to 3D print a jig to hold it closed, and in the process, I came up with a technique to align things without having to make 20 measurements or something. I'm making something up, but that would be very interesting. But it's really not a hard and fast rule. One of the things that I'm an editor for Hackaday, I didn't start out as an editor, but I'm on the editorial team. One of the things we always tell the writers is we hire you mainly to find what is interesting and be a barometer of that. So, for example, we're not a woodworking magazine, but if you go look, you'll see we sometimes talk about woodworking, but it's weird woodworking, right? It's not, I'm going to drill a hole and I used a drill press. Okay, yeah, we kind of all know that, but it might be, I don't have the right size drill bit. How do I get a hole? Or, we did one the other day where the guy wanted to have a concentric drill hole in a dowel, and it was very long. So instead of actually trying to drill it out, and I'm sure run out, and it's all, big, long drill bit, it would be almost impossible. He wound up making 2 halves of it, routing off the centers and then putting them together and bonding them. So that kind of thing, we go, oh, that's a clever technique. So we've talked about welding. We've talked about automotive. Sometimes we talk about technology of things too. So like a motorcycle, why catalytic converters are on motorcycles or not on motorcycles. That might be a topic if somebody did a deep dive into something like that. So again, it's very difficult to pin us down other than it's not, we don't do a lot of consumer electronics unless, again, you can come up with some hacky, technical, nerdy angle to it. But we don't have a lot of, oh, look, there's these wireless speakers and they're inexpensive. We're not that kind of site, right? So there's plenty of those.
Yeah. So the word, I mean, hack, it's a clever way of doing something. That's what a hack is. Yeah. So that's the way to think about it. So I'm sure looking through, I'll be able to see some ideas. That's fun. I had not visited Hackaday Al before, and so I'm engaged now, and I like anything that engages ham radio. So if you're a ham radio operator, I believe you need to do an activity of engagement, which is what this Zoom call is. And a net is the same thing. A club could be the same thing. A volunteer examiner, all this stuff. We have to do one. If you do one thing to give back, engaging in ham radio, it makes it a 10 times better. Ham radio operators kind of sit in their basement a lot, don't they?
Not in Texas because we don't have basements, but yes.
Okay, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right.
But I take your point.
They sit in the shack a lot, which is what you do, but it's just a whole nother level. And that, I love QST magazine. Here's the one that just came yesterday, and on page 9, everybody should read it. It's called A Call Out to Radio Clubs. And the CEO, David Minster, NA2AA, wrote a great little column about just exactly what I just said, kind of engaging one level up. So Hackaday fits right in with ham radio operators are clever dudes. I had a TIG welder too, so I wish I was better at it. You got to practice that kind of stuff. But to me, it fits in with ham radio. Think of the brackets you could make for mounting radios. That's kind of Hackaday stuff. There's a lot of Hackaday stuff in mounting technology. Bring technology with you. So, and that's bigger than ever. Outdoor, the whole POTA thing is pretty cool movement in ham radio. In the last 40 years that I've been doing it, it's what's always been needed. Get out of the shack and breathe some air.
Well, it's kind of micro field day too, right? I mean,
It
field day, we used to do that once a year, but now they do it every weekend. So I think that's actually
fun. It's so much fun. Let's do this every weekend, right? So,
hey, Al, do you ever watch or listen to the podcast, Ham Radio Workbench?
I have not.
You should try. There's one of the guys, and I forget his call right now. He's in Canada, but he's got a hybrid truck, and he went about wiring, the antenna. What's the one that motorizes up and down? Oh shoot, I'll forget. But he wired that. He wired battery charger into his back, and it's wired all into his a relay. When the truck turns on, and all of it turns on. His APRS turns on automatically. Might be a cool article for Hackaday.
Yeah. And, going back to what kind of things people do talk about. I mean, I just did a quick search over what we've done on ham radio recently. So like, here's one where a guy used Wago terminals to make a portable packable dipole. So there's your POTA angle, right? Here's one by me about how I remotely operate FT8, for example. Long chat, which is a new digital mode. We covered that. There's an article actually by me again talking about how to use the Brandmeister hose line so that you can listen to DMR without even having a license, just if you want to eavesdrop, which I don't know that whether that will encourage people to get licenses or not is another question, right? Depending on where they're listening. The guy that had the, I don't know if you saw KV4P had where they took the cheap VHF module and kind of married it to a cell phone and have the handy talkie cell phone combo. That's in there. I don't even know what this one's about. A bunch of, so a lot of different things. And that's just on the ham radio side. So, wiring an antenna. Here's a guy making paddles out of paper clips, right? It's CW paddles. So lots of different things. And again, the real question, the thing those all have in common is they're interesting, right? It's not just, it's about antennas or it's about the electronics or it's about the operating. It's just, it's got to be interesting.
That's
cool. Hey, Stan, let's go with Stan, see what kind of things are on his mind about Hackaday and Al.
Well, thanks, Dana. I'm wanders over to the legality side and other things because I think about all these wonderful ideas that someone may come up with and then write an article on and document, and how much of it is their original work and how much is something that they happen to have gleaned from somewhere else. And you could almost call it plagiarism, but do you have any problem with things like that? And what kind of vetting do you do on authors' submissions to make sure you don't get into trouble? And have you ever had any legal cases where someone was coming after Hackaday for, intellectual property violations?
Well, that's a good question. So there's really a couple of answers to that. The short answer is no, not really. We don't have a lot of trouble with that. The magazine, I say magazine, the website itself is protected with DCMA, right? We don't make decisions about things. We don't sell anything. If you write something and we post it our liability is if we get a DCMA takedown, we have to take it down, and then you have to resolve it. And if it doesn't get resolved, we can put it back up or not. It's up to us. That's pretty well defined. So we're like a Google or a CNN or a Newsweek, right? We're not liable for that. On the other hand, we have contests that we sponsored, and we have had one or two cases where somebody put in something for a contest that apparently infringed, perhaps inadvertently, on somebody's patent. And so again, we're not really liable for that because it's somebody else's thing, but we would have to take it down. We've had a couple of cases where we've had to take stuff down, and it's not up to us to decide whether it should be, right? It's the DCMA is very specific on that. You get a takedown notice, you got to take it down. Then they got so many days to respond, and if they do or don't, there's a whole set of rules. But it's never our decision whether or not it was an infringement of copyright or whatever. Now, where that gets complicated is I told you we also have Hackaday I. Okay, that's where you can go and post whatever you want. So it's kind of like YouTube in that respect. If you post up something that's your employer's proprietary information or something, and we get a notice of that, we have to take it down. And then there is trouble for that, but that trouble's on the person who did that, right? Even if we wrote about it, as basically like if somebody tells a lie in public and CNN reports on it, CNN doesn't get in trouble for that. Right? I'm picking on CNN or anybody, right? So we're kind of in that mode. Now, you could argue on the original content we do, the longer form articles, that yes, we could run afoul on something like that because we produce those. But of course, we don't just let everybody write for us. So presumably, we haven't had that problem where an author tried to mess us up. It was funny years ago. I still read it occasionally. Analog magazine, the science fiction magazine. I'm sure at least somebody's read Analog. There was a columnist for them, and I think he kind of got past his prime. Let's say he'd been with them for a long time. And I was reading his article one time. He had a column, and I was like, "This sounds really familiar. Why did I read this already?" And I'm thinking, "No, I don't think so." So I put it down, and of course, magazines in those days had a 2 or 3 month cycle. So about 3 months later, they apologized because apparently he had ripped off Dilbert. It was some letter from a piece from a Scott Adams book on Dilbert, and it was word for word. And I was like, oh yeah, that's where I read it. So, I don't know. I think he found it on the internet, and this was a number of years ago. So I guess he thought, oh, well, I guess I can use it. And that was the end of him with Analog, right? So that sort of thing, I think, happens less now because people understand that you can't do that. But yeah, we have had a few cases where we've had DCMA takedown notices and had to respond to those.
Interesting. Another one of our DMR Tech Net CoNet controls is Steve, KC8WXM. Steve could probably write an article about bagpipes because he's learning how to play the bagpipes.
All right.
We tried to get him to broadcast something on the show, but he says he can't with music copyrights and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably not the only reason. It's a work in progress. That's about it. So far, it's been over 1 year I've been practicing on the bagpipes. So, but anyway, I really don't have a question, but I'm just going over the site right now doing searches for stuff. It's pretty nice. I kind of like it. Yeah.
Well, Steve, you'll have to do an article.
You don't have something about bagpipes on there. I'm looking.
Oh
yeah, we have several things on bagpipes. There you go. So I knew we must.
Steve, you can start writing it right there. And also, it's called the Practice Chanter. Is that correct, Steve?
Yep. Yeah, Practice Chanter for the bagpipe.
He did a good job. He played Amazing Grace the other night for me.
Like a kazoo and a lot quieter.
Like a kazoo. Kazoo takes about 5 minutes to learn how to play. If you can talk, you can play one.
Plus has 9 notes. It's a 9-note kazoo.
Well, you'll notice the second article on that link I just posted in the chat is a bagpipes made with some bags and what looks like some kid's kazoo or flute or something, right? Oh, it's a recorder. I'm sorry, 2 recorders.
Oh, yeah.
Almost then. So, once again, this goes back to that theme though, right? If you just said, hey, this bagpipes, aren't they cool? That's probably not a Hackaday article, but how you make one out of garbage bags, that's definitely a Hackaday article.
Yeah.
Or, if you had one that played MIDI or, was MIDI controlled, or something that you blow into and it tells you if you're doing it right or something, and uses a Arduino or something, right? All those things would be Hackaday articles. So.
Yeah, the whole concept of the bag as an instrument to assist the instrument is pretty neat. And there's actually people who can do it with they can puff up their cheeks and make their cheeks into a bagpipe. So when they're playing the saxophone, they can play the saxophone nonstop for over 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, they breathe in through their nose and out through their mouth. Guys
Yeah.
do that
And they keep pressure on their
at
cheeks.
the same time. At the same time, somehow.
Yep.
And Steve used to play saxophone in school, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yep. Play the alto baritone sax.
yeah. And Al, you mentioned Arduino, or to go with that, Pi Star, a Pi board's right there. Rick has been experimenting with those, trying to get his grandkids involved. Rick, do you have a question?
Well, not really. I'm just fooling around with Sunfounder is the name of the company that makes, it's called a Pi-Car X robot. So I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 on it. It supposedly ties into AI and does a lot of different things. So I've got to get my 9-year-old interested. He wants to do block programming with that. And I've told him we're not putting an app on his phone so he can run it around with the app. He's going to have to program it. So
Exactly.
that's as far as that goes.
So he's 9 years old, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
So I'm going to share a link with you in the chat. It is a Hackaday article, but I've been doing this for years, even before I was with Hackaday. I've done it for a bunch of schools. When I was with Boeing every year for the Engineer for a Day event with the kids, I would do this. This is a great activity to do with kids to teach them about robotics, closed loop control, and it all involves them writing a program, if you will, and then someone has to execute it blindfolded. And you'll read about it, but it's great fun. How I haven't had a liability lawsuit over all these years is a miracle, but it's great fun. And in fact, when I was with Boeing, and every year they would come and say, we got the engineering week thing, the schools come in, we want the tech fellowship to do something. And I'd say, well, I could do something different. They're like, no, do the robot thing. We love that. We want that again. So every year I'd say, are you sure you want that again? Oh yeah, absolutely. So take a look at that. I think you'll have fun with them. Especially if you can grab a couple of their friends and get a crowd. It's a fun group activity.
Yeah, we'll have to play with that. Yeah, both my grandson, my older one's 14 and he's in robotics. He's in high school robotics now, so he's been competing with that. He went to the States the last couple of years, but this year he fell out, didn't make it. So, but it's different than what I'm planning for this car. We'll see what happens. But I've been doing it's a teensy programming with trying to run motors with PID control, and going forward is not a problem. Going backwards, I'm stuck somewhere. It's just not going what I want it to. But
it'll be something silly when you finally figure it out, right? The hard things are easy to find. It's the silly things that are hard to find.
I got to dig into the PID documentation, I guess, or even the code, see what happens. But my son-in-law is building a 12-pound battle butt to use two motors to make a flipper. So I'm writing the code to control the flipper.
Oh, nice.
So, but anyhow, that's kind of the stuff I'm doing. I more follow stuff than do it, so I don't have a whole lot of questions right now.
Rick, what was the name of that site you mentioned? Ham Shack Workshop or something like that?
Ham Radio Workbench. Yeah,
and what kind of articles do they have?
Oh, they're a podcast. So they, like you talked about that phone that the guy wrote or made the attach to a plug-in for the phone to run DMR. I think it's DMR. or FM, one of the
No, I
two.
think it's just analog, but yeah.
It's analog, but they had him on there and interviewed him. And one of the guys, Mike or Mark, designed the second version of the board for that device. Um, so they're involved with that. But Ham Radio Workbench is a cool thing. They have guys from a lot of different places. They've got over 200 episodes and going strong. The George K22226, I forget what his call sign is now, but he's designing a station controller, which is going to be for sale, so it's commercial. I don't know if you want to deal with that, but he designs repeater controllers and that kind of stuff too. But the station controller could be an interesting project.
Well, if you're interested in podcasts, by the way, we do one every Friday. So it's usually Elliot, who's our editor in chief, and then one of the other editors. So we take turns. So you won't always hear me on that, although you will sometimes hear me on that. But it's really a recap of, the better stories of the week. And then usually we have some anecdote, kind of like we're doing here, where you'll say, oh, that reminds me of that one we did with the robots or something. So it's not just a recitation of here's a bunch of articles we did this week. It's more two guys, or a guy and a lady discussing the articles of the week that were interesting. And sometimes there's some news and contests and things like that. So if you're a fan of podcasts, that's another one to check out. But I'll definitely check out the other one.
Cool. Hey, if you guys will have a question for Al, you got to unmute yourself. But I see Kurt is unmuted. Kurt always has a question. So let's go to Kurt, KF0CQN.
Hi, I really don't have a question. I will say I do love the Ham Radio Workbench podcast. Posted a comment there. It's a great way to get you to spend money.
Yeah.
You've always got a project or something out there that helps you, go do something like that. But my window or my entryway to Hackaday has been This Week in Amateur Radio, the website there. I usually use that website to get news and stuff like that, and they feature a lot of Hackaday articles. So that's my intro to it and kind of how I go find stuff out there. And unfortunately, my time has been doing a lot of work, so I haven't had a lot of time for side projects for the past couple months.
How many hours?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Al. I'll ask you a question when you're done.
I was just going to say, I was surprised, I know we have a lot of readers, obviously, we've been around for a long time, but when OpenAI published their list of websites they had been sucking data for, I think it was ChatGPT-2, we were fairly high up on the list. I mean, not like number 5 or anything, but we were in double digits. So I was, we have a lot of influence on the technical sphere of the internet, I think. So go ahead, Tom. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I just wondered how many hours or words a day do you write? Do you get up in the morning for 2 hours or 3 hours or something, or how do you do that?
I've been doing this for a frighteningly long time, right? I started writing articles for an 1802 newsletter back in the 70s. And boy, I look back at that now and I'm like, man, that was terrible. But, not that it's any much better now, but, I use Grammarly. And so let me grab one of my Grammarly Insights emails here. Oh, this is the wrong email account. Hold on. But it's staggeringly bad. I mean, because I'll tell you, I told you we run about 10 a day. I'm on the hook for 30 dailies a month. And so, you can't take a lot of time for them.
Is there a minimum word length for your article, like 500 words or something?
Well, again, that depends on the type of article. So if you look at the dailies, they usually run about 200 to 300 words, although sometimes I'm a little long-winded, as you might guess, and I'll go a lot longer than that. It just depends on if I'm really into something or not. The original articles we do are generally around anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 words. If they're longer than, they get up around 2,000, we probably split them because, it's the internet, right? People don't have the attention span. So just looking back a couple of weeks ago, Grammarly says I did 180,996 words, which was more than 97% of their users. 4,771 unique words. Now, not all those are for Hackaday, but since November 29th, 2015, they say they've analyzed 16.5 million words I've written. So, but like I say, I've been doing this a long time. I'm very fast compared to what I would have done in 1984, right? So yeah.
So do you have writer's cramp?
Well, interestingly enough, here's my hot tip of the day. I have the beautiful Logitech MX mouse, and it's very expensive, and I have this horrible pain right here, and I switched to the vertical mouse, and it takes about 2 or 3 days to get used to it, and then in about a week, all that pain in your arm goes away. So yeah.
Cool.
Save money on a chiropractor, get a vertical mouse. This is you look on Amazon, this one is ergo driven. They're not very expensive, and it's very high quality. It's very reminiscent of the MX. Whereas I've got some from China that are super cheap.
I was gonna say, I think that mouse that you had up, the vertical one, is very similar to the mouse I have for AutoCAD by Libri.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really good quality material. I actually took the other ones. Oh no, wait, here we go. Hang on. There's a cheap Chinese one for like $4. And I mean, it looks like a mouse that they just flipped over, and it feels like plastic you'd get out of a cookie tray or something. You know, when you buy Oreos and there's a plastic tray. So you want this one, even though it's about probably, 10 times the price, but that's still 20 or 30 bucks. This one was, I threw these into an order from China just because they were $2 or something, and they're $2 mice. So surprise.
You're speaking of China. It's kind of funny. I woke up. I fell asleep, and I woke up, and just in time for my wife to say dinner. And I looked at the time, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to get on." And Bob told me, sign on now. It's still going. But what I was going to say is the trackball I got is usable with not just Libri's AutoCAD, but other AutoCAD. And it's purposely set up with different functions in it for AutoCAD. And I think I bought that from China for, I think it was like $13.
Yeah.
And
if you look on Hackaday, you'll see there's a lot of Space Mice clones that people build, and they're, they don't cost what a Space Mouse costs. So
right.
If you do CAD work, that's kind of interesting.
Right. I also got matter of fact, it just came today. I was kind of tickled that I got it. I got my little depth set gauge. I paid 87 cents for it with the drill bit. And I got a projector for computer and video. I think I spent a whole $17 on it. And I got a new touchscreen for the Raspberry Pi 5, and I spent a whole, I think, $13, $14 on that one as well. And it's really good shape. I mean, considering it's come from a long way, but they really packed everything well.
Hey, Al, I've got a question for you, because next week we are talking on the TechNet about WPSD, some hints and tips and other stuff. I was poking around with it, and I discovered you can have it phonetically on your screen display. You can change if it goes to QRZ or radio ID to get the IDs for people on that. But I was hoping, just a hint, put something more about WPSD in the article that you just published about getting, digital mobile radio. Oops, can't see it. The networks from zero to hero, because I think, and you see that on Brandmeister and TGF, people use hotspots a lot more than they do repeaters. And we all started with repeaters, but unfortunately, hotspots allow you to talk halfway around the world. You don't need a huge antenna. You don't have to change your code plug. You don't have to reprogram anything. Once you set it up, you're good to go.
Yeah, and well, the current version of that that's public is version 0.1a, because I took some of corrections. I think you sent me some corrections actually, and updated for that. But I do have a version 2 or 0.2 that I just need to pull the trigger on. And that's part of what I want to do is add more. When I wrote this, like I said last night, I'm a neophyte at this. It's not like I know what I'm doing. I'm just putting down what I've learned. But at that time, I didn't have a hotspot, so it was kind of theoretical for me to even say anything about that. Now I've been writing. Last week I spent a lot of time writing code for WPSD, and so I've kind of gotten into it. But so I want to add a little bit more about that. Also, I mentioned last night I've got the frequently asked questions, which and that has a lot more hotspot stuff in it. Because again, if you look at when I wrote that, I was figuring out the hotspot in that point, right? So yeah, there's definitely more to come. And like I mentioned yesterday too, I'm thinking these are kind of community documents. So if people have suggestions or corrections or things that, I'm happy to take contributions of it and get it in there. I think it'd be great. I think those kind of things work really well when people will contribute. Years and years ago, I used to maintain a frequently asked questions list like that for the basic stamp. And that was, a lot of people contributed into that, and it was really a good effort. Who was it? I forget who said earlier in that, hams shouldn't just sit in the basement. And I believe that too. I noticed we have John on KC5LAA. He's part of a group. I don't remember how long we've been doing it, but we meet once a month for breakfast, and it's all hams that build something. And it's kind of like Hackaday, right? It's not people that build antennas or radios or computer systems. It's some people build antennas and some people build radios and some people build, we have we've had machinists. We've had a NASA flight surgeon that used to join us that was a ham. He unfortunately is a silent key now, but, and ostensibly it's just a bunch of old guys having breakfast. But in fact, we do frequently work with kids, high schools. One of the local hams is really big on bringing school kids up through the licensing, and so we work with them. Before the pandemic, when I used to take a student every semester, I couldn't really bring them to work because of the kind of work I was doing. So I would bring them there to present their final presentations and stuff like that. So it's a great opportunity to kind of socialize. And I see these kind of documents as part of an extension of that, right? It's a way to kind of put back into the community. And I try to do that when I can. Unfortunately, it's one of those things you can't do it as much as you'd like, but you can do it as much as you can. So
well said on that one. Hey,
I got a quick question for him. I don't know where you're out from or where you live at in Michigan, or if you're in Michigan, but have you ever heard of Makerspace in Lansing?
I have not. I'm not from Michigan. I'm from Houston, Texas.
Okay.
There are maker spaces all over the place. We do cover those a lot. There's one here in town. I speak at it occasionally, kind of like we're doing here. There's one where I used to go to school, where my son's currently in school, and I dropped in on them last time I was up there and visited. So yeah, there's a lot of maker spaces in different places. It's really challenging for them because somehow you want to make money, but you can't make too much money or else it drives people out of it, right? So
yeah,
I think there's a real balance in that. Unless you've got a sugar daddy, like the one at the university funds it. And so it's mostly students and it's fairly inexpensive. But I know the ones here in town, kind of fall into two categories, the poor ones and the rich ones. And so it's kind of,
yeah.
So
I have a question for Jay, because Jay actually posted this on the 31268 DMR Tech Net channel on TGIF about his snowblower died after 20, 30 years. And he asked, you guys have an experience with electric snowblowers? And James, you want to take it from there? Maybe you could write an article about your journey on that.
No, I'm not smart enough to write an article on that. No, my snowblower did die. So Dana and Steve and Brad were on. So I was just asking everybody's opinion, what they thought about the battery operated snow blowers. If anybody had experience with them, their thoughts on it. And, I pulled the trigger, I bought one, and it's great. Now, it probably won't work so well on heavy wet snow here in Michigan, but 2, 3 inches, 4 inches of light snow, I was able to do 3 houses, no problem on one battery. So I just wanted everybody's opinion that day. To write an article? No, I don't think so.
You never know, James.
Yeah.
If you look, I put a link up there. There's actually 6 snowblower articles on the site, and one of them just happens to be the first one by coincidence. Is what a feature we do called Fail of the Week, where somebody tried to build a snowblower, and I guess it did. I haven't read it, but apparently it didn't work out as well as he thought it would, and that's why it's the Fail of the Week. So sometimes there's a lot to learn in what doesn't work as well as what works, right? So yeah.
My snowblower is from 1991, and it has been sitting since 2017, and it started on 2 poles on Sunday. And I can do 50 driveways with it there, Jim. Or Jay.
All right, show off. All right.
I've got the last Craftsman snowblower that was sold by Sears. It's got a 34-inch width on it. It's pretty good size. So
I like the title of that article, Al. Fail of the Week. The little remote controlled snowblower that couldn't. Interesting.
Well, and if you look at the second link I sent you, the first one on that is a 3D printed snowblower, and that image is really cool, the title image on it. Again, I don't read too much of the snowblower articles, so I don't know if I'm familiar with that one, but.
And I got a 3D printer. Oh, boy.
There you go.
Who else
Are
has
you
questions?
using it much?
I'm sorry. What's that, Dan?
Are you using it much? Have you done any work with it that you can show?
I don't design stuff, but since I went to Michigan State, there's a Michigan State Spartan keychain holder. And I've got,
cool.
I like Calvin and Hobbes. So I made some more keychain. I'm trying to design something for the DMR Tech Net passed out at Dayton. By the way, Al, are you going to be at Dayton this year?
I go occasionally with N3LLL, who is religiously goes, but I don't know if we've got plans to go this year or not. I have to check with the boss.
I've been past couple years. What I like is seeing everyone there. Also, go to the Dayton Amateur Radio Association headquarters. If you haven't been there, check it out. It's over by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. One of my friends is, he helped with it right there. He gave us a tour. Boy, that is really nice. Calvin and Hobbes, I use those for my cars. I have 2 cars, and one's red, the other one's white. So that's why I can tell which keys go to which car. And then this one I'll get in trouble with, but it says I give 0 F blank CKS. So who else has a question?
Back on the snowblower topic before you take another question, just to show you, I was telling you how we have such an eclectic, weird mix of things in Hackaday. So not only do we have snowblowers, but we have an article talking about the Snowtel network that tracks the depth of the snow with the Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service. So this is an original piece, right? This isn't somebody's project, but it just goes to show you that you just never know what's going to show up in the pages of Hackaday. And again, the real question is it interesting to people like us? So since we were talking snow, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. So
something you don't have to worry about too often.
Not
down
me,
in
no.
Houston. So,
but Dan's in Montana, so I suspect he gets a little bit of it too. So,
who else has something on there? Who else wants to ask another question? Ron, you're quiet. You're in Niagara, or Niagara Falls, I should say.
Yeah, no, I'm just enjoying the conversation. One of the things I'm interested in is how do you bring people along? You can get them interested into radios, and I've looked at the Hackaday website, and there might be some good ideas in there. Anything from scouting to the school districts to just friends. And it's what I'm concerned about is that there's a lot of us older guys, and I don't see as many younger guys coming along. And that's one of my focuses.
Yeah, I share that concern, Ron. I really do. I try to work with kids as much as I can, but I used to take a student every year. And like I say, I've done the engineer for a day program for Boeing for many years when I was with Boeing. And I think they still do it because I gave them, they said, well, you're leaving. Can we still use your stuff? I'm like, oh, of course, everybody can use it. So um, it's really interesting. I did a deal with, and unfortunately, they've gone pay for play, so you can't see it anymore. But the teaching channel had a deal where several Boeing engineers went into these classrooms, and we did a egg drop with the students where they had an electromagnetic deployment system that they had to design and build. And man, if you've never done anything like that, that is so rewarding. And most of those kids, they're not going to take to that. But if you reach even just a couple of them, and we had one of the kids went up to one of the other teachers after that and said, "This is the best day ever. I'm going to be an engineer when I grow up." And you think, man, maybe they won't, but at least it opened their eyes to that possibility, right? So I really love, especially the underserved schools, the really low SES schools, where a lot of times I go to the local schools and I'll say, how many of you have parents who are engineers? Well, this is NASA area, right? I live near the Johnson Space Center. 90% of them will raise their hands. Now, most of them can't tell you what kind of engineer their parents are, but they still know they're engineers, right? But you go into some of these other schools and you say, how many of you have parents that are engineers? You will get one or two hands, maybe at the most. And it's really important that people, kids see that technology is not just something you can use, it's something you can create, and you can actually make a pretty good living creating it. Not that every ham is in that business, but even just having an interest in it can have benefits, right? So
Michigan State has the School of Packaging. When you talked about the egg drop, they do that every spring. They have to design a package so when they drop the egg in it, it doesn't shatter.
Yep.
You're talking about getting kids interested in things. I just talked, was it this week or the week before, with the principal from the high schools about getting out their way with the comm trailer in the spring and stuff, and show them what we do and how to become a ham and how you assist in other organizations that are there for the communities. And he's actually wants to put us in right after their day of storm watch or stormy weather, and how to, they teach. I can't believe they still teach it, but now more than ever, how to prepare for a tornado or hazardous weather in your area. And so they want us to come in then, and he's going to get the date to me. But people are out there, those kids are always wanting to learn new stuff.
Well, we had a ham here. Unfortunately, he's another silent key. Like you say, we're all getting older, but Nick Lance was awesome. He worked for NASA, and one of the things he did was help the astronauts get their licenses, because most of them have licenses now, right? But he also would go into the schools and do a semester or a unit or something where they would end up getting their ham radio licenses. And so he was just awesome. He minted probably, I don't know, John could probably tell us if he'd come off mute, but I bet he minted 1,000 new hams. Now, many of them probably never operated or operated twice and put it aside, but they might come back to it, and at least they've got an awareness and appreciation of it. He would have to get some of us to go be the volunteer examiners, because obviously he couldn't be their VEC, right? But we would go in and actually do the tests for him. But man, he was a machine. He minted so many hams under the age of, 18. It's very impressive. Really miss him.
Cool. Hey, your friend John, KC5LAA. John, unmute yourself, say hi, and tell us a little bit of a question or comment you have for tonight.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I've got a net going on right now. So, but I've been enjoying it completely.
John,
Thanks,
for
John.
joining
Appreciate
me.
you dropping by.
And if I look at the clock, we got like 30 more seconds. Al, final thoughts from you on DMR Tech Net TV.
Well, I think that, one thing that's really I've appreciated is that you guys on the TechNet team, y'all are really welcoming to newcomers and you have a lot of information that really appeals to me because obviously I like to put information out too. You just have more of it than I do. So, so I really appreciate what you guys have done to help build community in this space. And I appreciate you inviting me to both of these events. It's been really fun. So.
Well, it was kind of ironic, but one of Stan's friend, and he was last night on the show. Stan, what Norm's call sign? NY1US from New York. And Al, as you mentioned, all of a sudden, hey, I got an article about ham radio. All of a sudden, wait a minute, you're the same guy. WD5GNR. So that was cool. Al, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you for sharing your Hackaday articles and other stuff with us. It's been fun. We hope you'll join us again. This is DMR Tech Net TV. Thank you all for watching, and we'll have this posted on our website and our YouTube page.